When my brother was 8. He claimed he was reborn and didn't want me anymore. He led me, his 5-year-old sister with visual impairment, to a little idiot who was scavenging through rubbish in the countryside. That silly boy was searching for a rag doll among the garbage. My brother pointed at the doll hair clip on my head and said, "She's your rag doll now. She belongs to you from now on." After saying this, my brother walked away without looking back. I waited and waited, from noon until dusk. My brother never returned. Suddenly, a strange voice echoed through the air. The wicked supporting character doesn't know that the male lead has been reborn. In this life, he will only protect the female lead who died tragically in his previous life, treating her as his dear sister. I couldn't understand those words. I just stood there trembling, with tears in my eyes. The silly boy slowly finished searching through the last piece of rubbish, and wiped his dirty hands on his clothes. Then he tugged at my doll hair clip and said, "Rag doll, would you like to come home with me?" Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. At the end of the road, that resolute departing figure never appeared again. I bit my lip hard, my eyes red as I pushed away the silly boy's hand. When I spoke, my voice trembled despite trying to stay strong. "I can speak. I'm not your rag doll. My mother died in childbirth, and my father vanished without a trace. My brother took me, still in swaddling clothes, to the orphanage. Since then, only my brother has ever been kind to me. He always said children shouldn't go with strangers." I clenched my fists, standing beside the smelly rubbish bins, waiting for his return. 5 years. Since my birth, he had never once abandoned me. I couldn't understand why he suddenly left me here. Nor could I understand those strange voices in the air talking about rebirth. I just believed my brother would return soon. The sky grew darker as the sun sank behind the woods. Tears seemed to find their way into my eyes. I roughly wiped them away with my hand, keeping my gaze fixed on that road. The silly boy stood before me, studying me intently for a long while. I widened my eyes, staring at him warily. "My brother will come for me." "I won't go with you." The boy looked startled, watching my moving lips. He seemed to finally realize I wasn't actually a rag doll. Disappointed, he said, "Well, stay put then. It's getting dark, I need to go home." The sun's last edge disappeared behind the woods. Everything grew darker. The silly boy walked away, his silhouette gradually fading into the distance. The last rays of daylight faded away. I lowered my head, barely able to see my own feet anymore. Strange insect sounds and bird calls filled the air, while mysterious rustling came from the bushes. I held back my tears desperately, afraid to make a sound. Crouching down into a ball, I clenched my sweaty hands tightly. It felt like ages had passed. I was getting sleepy, my eyelids fighting to stay open. But I dared not sleep. I could only keep my eyes wide open and ears alert, wary of the pitch-black surroundings. Until suddenly, a figure appeared before me. A familiar silhouette, about a head taller than me. The tears I'd been holding back finally fell with a plop. I stood up, finally daring to release my held breath. My tightly bitten lips trembled uncontrollably. I burst into tears and threw myself into his arms. But I caught an unfamiliar scent from the boy. It wasn't my brother. I abruptly stopped crying and stepped back. In the darkness, I struggled to make out the dirty clothes on the boy. It was that silly boy who rummaged through rubbish. He stared at me in the darkness. After a while, he spoke foolishly. "Your brother definitely doesn't want you anymore." Embarrassed and angry, I clenched my fists. "You're lying." The silly boy said seriously, "He said he's giving you to me as a rag doll. Nobody ever takes back what they've thrown away." I gritted my teeth, like a hedgehog raising its spines. I wanted to argue back, but no words would come out. Only uncontrollable whimpers escaped my throat. The silly boy looked around and said, "Nobody wants you anymore. If you stay here, the monsters will eat you." He turned and started walking away. I couldn't hold back my sobs anymore, my whole body shaking. "You're lying, my brother will definitely come for me." But my feet moved on their own, following him. It felt like there really were monsters behind me, with sharp fangs chasing after me. My steps grew quicker, following behind him, still afraid. At some point, I reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Following him closely, I cried even louder. My brother will come for me. He promised to buy me a cake today for my birthday. He's been saving money for months. Just last night, he had gently held my hand and said, "Eleanor, tomorrow I will give you the biggest surprise." I don't know how long we walked. When my crying turned to hiccups, I suddenly noticed light ahead. Strange voices spoke in the air again. "Isn't this the military family compound? Where the female lead will soon be adopted and live? Why did this wandering simpleton bring the evil supporting character here? He's an idiot, what do you expect? It's illegal to trespass in the military family compound in this era. Looks like the evil supporting character who did terrible things in her past life will be written off at age 5. That's when I saw it, the imposing wide gates under the streetlights, with a national flag on top. Armed guards in uniform stood at attention outside, their expressions stern. My crying stopped instantly in my throat. This time, I understood some of the voices in the air. I gripped the silly boy's sleeve tighter, about to say we couldn't go in there. Suddenly, a young couple rushed out from the military family compound, looking straight in our direction. The man wore a military uniform, his face stern with anger. The woman wore an elegant dress, her eyes red as she ran towards us. With tears in her eyes, she grabbed the boy beside me. "Running off again, running off secretly again. We've been searching the whole compound frantically. Are you trying to worry us to death?" I nervously gripped my skirt hem, not daring to make a sound. The woman noticed me and her expression froze. Whose child is this?" The silly boy lifted his head proudly. "Someone gave it to me. It can talk and even cry." The woman's face instantly stiffened. Behind her, the stern man, hearing this, strode forward angrily. "This is nonsense. You've caused serious trouble." He then suppressed his emotions and crouched down, trying to speak gently. "Little girl, do you remember your home and family? I will take you back right away." Trembling with fear, I finally managed to speak. "I'm from the orphanage. I have a brother, he accidentally lost me." The man handed the silly boy to the security guard. Then, along with the lady in her elegant dress, they took me back to the orphanage. Outside the orphanage, I immediately recognized my brother's figure. Under the dim street lamp, he was holding the director's hand, discussing something. My eyes instantly welled up with tears. As I hurriedly pushed open the door of the military jeep and ran towards them, the couple behind me, seeing I had found my family, didn't follow. I rushed to the orphanage gate, just meeting my brother's gaze. But I saw shock in his eyes, quickly followed by disgust and warning. I thought I must have seen wrong, until I heard him urgently continuing his conversation with the director. "Didn't you always say she was stupid? Couldn't even remember routes she'd walked hundreds of times? She's sickly too, causing so much trouble for the orphanage. This time I accidentally lost her, couldn't find her, it's nothing to do with you." Commander Lowe and his wife, besides being interested in Eleanor, they're also interested in Diane. Let them adopt Diane, she's clever and remembers routes. She'll definitely come back to visit you often. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. A few days ago, Commander Lowe and his wife came to the orphanage. They said Diane and I were the most well-behaved and wanted to adopt one of us. My brother managed to make me perform well in front of them, winning Mrs. Lowe's favor, and they initially decided to adopt me. Diane Brooks was the daughter of my mother's old acquaintance. Later, when that acquaintance was imprisoned, Diane came to the orphanage too. She had tried several times to get close to my brother, but he never paid her any attention. Yesterday when she came to me, saying she wanted to celebrate my birthday with me, my brother had angrily scolded her. "Eleanor's birthday has nothing to do with you." Now, just one day later, his attitude had changed so dramatically. I didn't understand what was happening. Just like I didn't understand those strange sounds that had started appearing in the sky from time to time. The director fell silent for a while after hearing my brother's words. His voice carried satisfaction and greed. "Young man, remember what you said. You lost your sister yourself. Diane is sensible, and if she moves up in the world, she'll surely come back to thank me. I stood there numbly, clutching my hands tightly, unable to process it all for a long while. When the director left, my brother walked towards me with a stern face. He asked coldly, "How did you know to come back? Did that silly boy teach you the way?" My eyes hurt as I tried hard not to cry. But when I spoke, I couldn't help feeling utterly betrayed. "Why did you abandon me? Why?" My brother gave a cold laugh. His gaze carried an intense, strange hatred as he looked at me. "If I hadn't been soft-hearted, considering our sibling bond, the first time I saw you in this life, I would have killed you." I stared at him, confused and terrified. He moved closer, his hateful gaze cutting into me like knives. "In the past, Diane just made a joke about selling my University A acceptance letter. You went to make trouble at the university and military camp, causing her to lose face, end up in prison, and take her own life out of shame." I couldn't quite understand what he was saying. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes filled with fury and contempt. "Why am I even wasting words with you? Listen, Eleanor Gill, I'm being merciful by letting you live this time. But I never want to see you again. Whether you live or die is up to fate now. Never show your face to Diane or me again, or you'll regret it." My whole body trembling, I instinctively reached out to grab his arm. But my brother violently shook off my hand. He turned around and pushed me hard. I never knew he could push someone with such force. My body seemed to fly through the air. And through my blurred vision, my forehead hit something. Blood trickled down, flowing into my eyes. Through my blood-stained vision, I watched my brother's cold and resolute figure walk away. I finally understood he truly didn't want me anymore. For reasons that were still confusing and incomprehensible to me. The young couple who had brought me there took me back to their home in the military family compound. As soon as I entered, I saw the silly boy sitting on the sofa in the front room. His eyes were fixed on the doorway, looking extremely anxious. Seeing me, his eyes lit up. He immediately stood up and rushed over, grabbing my wrist. He put on a stern face, looking angrily at the young couple. "She's mine. Don't take her away again next time." He tilted his head, carefully looking me up and down. "Are you hungry? Tired? I'll take you to eat, take you to sleep." Like he was truly caring for a rag doll. The woman sighed and spoke to me softly. "He's my son, Marvin Reed. 6 months ago, something happened, his sister passed away. And since then his mind has been. So he wasn't a homeless person collecting rubbish. The rag doll he went looking for probably belonged to his sister." The woman held my other hand and continued gently. "But he won't hurt anyone. If you're scared, I can have him moved too." I remembered how I had sent him away at dusk. Yet after dark, he had come back to find me. I suddenly looked up and shook my head firmly. "I'm not scared." The woman's eyes grew misty as she patted my head. "Good. Since he brought you home, as long as you don't leave, this will be your home." The housekeeper arranged a bedroom for me at Mrs. Reed's request. Marvin was delighted, following the housekeeper around busily. He helped carry my bedding, brought me a toothbrush and cup, and served me food in bowls of various sizes. Late at night, after washing up, I sat by the window secretly crying, too scared to sleep in this strange place. Suddenly, the door creaked open slightly. Marvin appeared in the doorway, his fluffy head poking through, carrying his bedding. He whispered hopefully, "Can I make a bed on the floor next to yours? I promise I won't snore." Looking at him, I was reminded of my brother's face. My lips trembled as tears fell more heavily. That night, with Marvin sleeping beside my bed, I managed to get a peaceful night's rest. Before I knew it, I had stayed with the Reed family for over 2 months, and learned more about their situation. Mr. Reed was a captain at the military camp, while Mrs. Reed was a cardiac surgeon at the provincial hospital. Marvin also had a grandfather who remained in the capital, whose mysterious status was never discussed in detail. I wasn't old enough for school yet, and Marvin was temporarily out of school due to his cognitive issues. When I went to the local shop with Mrs. Reed, I brought back a rag doll for him. He treasured it dearly and finally stopped rummaging through rubbish bins. He spent his days with me, making tiny clothes for the doll. By late summer, a stray cat wandered into the military family compound. We built it a shelter and took it in. In the warm, harmonious atmosphere of the Reed household, I gradually overcame my anxiety and fear of abandonment by my brother Nathan. Until autumn came, while I was feeding the cat in the compound, I suddenly saw Diane Brooks, whom I hadn't seen in ages, entering with the Lowe's housekeeper. My mind flashed back to Nathan's words. Diane is smarter than Eleanor. Why not let the regimental commander Lowe's adopt her? It seemed his wish had finally come true. As I was feeding the cat, I got lost in thought watching Diane. She walked into the front yard with her chin held high, looking haughty. She glanced around. Upon noticing me, her expression froze momentarily before turning to one of extreme disgust. I ignored her and continued feeding the cat. But she walked straight towards me, sneering arrogantly. You unwanted child. How dare you come here with that stray cat? Do you even know where you are? Someone like you could end up in jail. She was always like this. Whenever Nathan wasn't around to protect me, she would yell at me. I continued playing with the cat, ignoring her. This enraged her, and she suddenly stepped on my cat's front paw. The cat yelped in pain and surprise. It raised its other paw and scratched her ankle hard. Diane let out a sharp scream and kicked the cat away. She glared at her housekeeper with fury. Are you blind? This wretched thing scratched me. I'm Regimental Commander Lowe's daughter now. Get rid of these two strays right now. The cat curled up in pain, whimpering. Furious, I picked it up and grabbed the ceramic bowl of cat food from the ground, hurling it at Diane's face. Diane's forehead started bleeding. She lunged at me like a madwoman. How dare you hit me? You orphan that even the children's home didn't want. Do you know who I am now? I grabbed her hair and bit the hand she was about to slap me with. My cat jumped from my arms onto her shoulder, hissing and scratching at her neck. The housekeeper worked for a respectable family in the military camp. She had clearly never witnessed such a scene before. She stared at us, two children only 5 or 6 years old, too shocked to react. Until Nathan helped Diane carry her luggage in from outside the military family compound. Diane's face and neck were covered in several scratch marks, looking quite brutal, while my arm bore her teeth marks. Nathan rushed over, his voice harsh and deeply disappointed. You're still as viciously cruel as ever. My ears were ringing, and I felt dizzy. For a moment, I even had the illusion that he was scolding Diane. For a long time before, he had known Diane's true nature better than anyone. He would angrily drive her away whenever she came near me. I glanced at him, seeing his face turned ashen. Until he came closer, roughly pulled me away, and furiously scolded me. Even to a 5-year-old child, you're still so ruthlessly cruel. This time I understood clearly he was scolding me. I felt as if he had suddenly turned into a monster, starting from my 5th birthday. A monster wearing the face of the brother who once loved and protected me most, but now with a twisted and distorted expression. Nathan hugged the crying Diane and angrily ordered me. Apologize to Diane immediately, then take that beast and get out. I was injured too. I had always been well-behaved and never bullied anyone. But he didn't care about the facts at all, his eyes only showing surging anger towards me. I finally felt that I didn't know him anymore. He wasn't my brother anymore. He had abandoned me. This time, I didn't want him either. I clenched my hands at my sides, straightened my back, and glared at him. She bullied my cat first. I did nothing wrong, she should be the one apologizing. Nathan was furious, veins bulging on his hand and temple. But he couldn't do anything to me. He could only turn his angry gaze to the housekeeper. Your young lady has been wronged. Why haven't you driven this wild child and the cat out yet? The housekeeper looked uncomfortable, stammering. I really can't make that decision. This child has been living with Captain Reed's family for over 2 months. Nathan looked at her in disbelief. That's impossible. She couldn't possibly have connections with anyone in the military camp. The housekeeper could only tell the truth. Captain Reed's 8-year-old son, who isn't quite right in the head. Brought this child home 2 months ago. Nathan was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he seemed to understand something. He glared at me with fury. No wonder you obediently followed me to the countryside that day. Playing innocent with a 5-year-old's memory. You knew all along that boy wasn't really homeless. But I followed him that day simply because. For 5 years, I had always trusted him the most and been the most obedient. Not once had I ever refused his requests. It was because I had always firmly believed that in this world, my brother could never harm me. But now, I understand I was wrong. That day, he just wanted to get rid of me. I clenched my fists tightly and looked up at him coldly, forcing myself not to show any hint of hurt or grievance. Diane, with tears in her eyes, asked Nathan with displeasure. Nathan, will Eleanor have to live here with me from now on? Nathan was obviously extremely wary of me, though he had no choice in the matter. After a long pause, he softly reassured Diane, "Don't be afraid. She's only being raised by a captain, who ranks lower than your foster father. Besides, they're probably just looking for a plaything for their son. They haven't even filed adoption papers, they won't actually adopt her." Such cruel words. I turned away, holding back the sting in my eyes. Nathan tightened his grip and declared with firm conviction, "No matter what, Diane, I promise you that from now on, everything you have, absolutely everything, will be 1,000 times better than what Eleanor Gill has." Diane finally broke into a smile through her tears, casting a challenging glance at me. I refused to back down, hugging my cat tightly as I coldly responded to them. "We'll see who ends up better off." I took my cat and walked straight into the house. Those strange voices started echoing in the air again. The male lead is so powerful. This time, he'll finally protect the female lead properly and make up for the regrets of his past life. Such a vicious supporting character at such a young age. Look how she scratched our poor girl, truly born evil. Don't worry, even if the Reed family adopts her, she won't be arrogant for long. Haven't you noticed? Captain Reed is that NPC who died young in the last life. His daughter died, his son became mentally disabled. Though he put up a strong front, he was suffering inside, smoking and drinking until he died early from lung cancer. Later, his wife and his father in the capital also died of grief. I couldn't hear those jumbled voices clearly anymore. No matter how strong I tried to appear in front of Nathan, I was still just a 5-year-old child, being abandoned by the only family member who had been by my side since birth. I couldn't help feeling devastated and terrified. I fell seriously ill with a high fever, drifting in and out of consciousness for nearly a week. Marvin was beside himself with worry, refusing to leave my bedside. Even Mrs. Reed, who had bought tickets to return to work at the provincial capital hospital, and Captain Reed, who was swamped with duties at the military camp, dropped everything to stay home and anxiously care for me. I burned with fever for many days, my consciousness becoming increasingly confused. Strange scenes began to blur through my mind. A 17 or 18-year-old Nathan, holding Diane's lifeless body with despair in his eyes, accused me with bloodshot eyes. "You killed her. You killed Diane." An elderly Nathan on his deathbed, still unwilling to speak a word to me, clutching only Diane's favorite coat tightly in his arms. My forehead felt like it was on fire, my consciousness growing more and more chaotic. In this delirious state, in my half-dreaming condition, I suddenly awakened to all the memories of my past life. Diane first came to the orphanage when I was nearly 5 years old. She was the daughter of my mother's old friend. After her mother's tragic accident, she ended up here with us. When she first arrived, she was all alone and often cried in front of Nathan and me. Life wasn't easy in the orphanage. Nathan protected me and didn't trust anyone else. No matter how many times Diane wandered around us looking pitiful, he never spared her a glance. But I suppose hearts can waver. When I was 7, I developed a high fever one night. Nathan was looking after me, wiping my forehead with a damp cloth to bring down the temperature. Diane ran more than 3 miles in the rain to the clinic to get medicine for me. That night, through my fever-hazed vision, I saw her rush in through the doorway. She was soaked from head to toe, clutching a paper bag of medicine. Her thin face as white as a sheet. For the first time in my life, I saw Nathan look at someone other than me with trembling eyes. After Diane left the medicine and went away, Nathan sat by my bed for a long while. Thinking I was asleep, he got up with a glass of water and a clean towel. I knew who he was going to find. An instinctive unease rose from deep within me. Since birth, I'd only had my brother. Even the slightest shift of his heart towards someone else was enough to fill me with terror. After that, I suddenly began to intensely dislike Diane. Once I recovered, I couldn't help but confront her, telling her with hostility, "Stay away from my brother from now on. Don't even speak to him." Diane was holding her dinner tray from the orphanage cafeteria. Hearing this, she looked at me with a mocking, challenging smile. I never expected her to show such an expression. The taut string of anxiety in my mind suddenly snapped. I rushed forward angrily and grabbed her arm. "I'm talking to you. Stay away from my brother, do you hear me?" Her eyes suddenly turned red, and she bit her lip as if holding back tears. Her hands loosened, and the food scattered across the floor. Before I could react, Nathan's voice rang out behind me, scolding me for the first time. "Eleanor, you can't be so selfish." After that, I could no longer be the obedient girl I once was. I harbored immense hostility towards Diane, leading to countless conflicts between us. She was skilled at pretending, showing her malice towards me in private with cold mockery, while acting meek and submissive in front of others. But I couldn't control my emotions, losing my temper numerous times. Nathan gradually began showing disappointment in me. He started spending more time with Diane, using apologizing on my behalf as an excuse. Yet he still remembered his role as my brother. Though dissatisfied with my willfulness, he still chose to stand by me when it really mattered. He fought hard to have me adopted by Regimental Commander Lowe. Thanks to him, I was able to study in provincial capital, and later develop my career in the capital. His life seemed to always follow my direction. However, he would still become distracted whenever he heard about Diane being adopted by a gambling addict's family and living in misery. Later, he secretly sent her letters and money. He even took long train journeys just to catch a glimpse of her. When he got accepted to the top University A, he heard Diane was about to be beaten to death by her adoptive father. Before university started, he took part-time jobs. Combined with the money I gave him, he saved up by living frugally and secretly rented a small flat in the capital. Then he brought Diane all the way there. I didn't know until I learned his University A acceptance letter was lost. My adoptive father, Mr. Lowe, helped investigate. We discovered his university place had been sold by Diane to a factory director's son. In those days, a University A acceptance letter was incredibly precious. It could easily change someone's life. Furious and out of control, I gathered evidence and filed a lawsuit. When Diane was arrested, she was still crying to Nathan, saying, "It was just a joke." I'd never seen an acceptance letter like that before. I was so proud of Nathan, I just wanted to show it to others. What a poor excuse. If she hadn't actually sold it, the police would never have arrested her. But Nathan, his eyes red for the first time, said in a trembling voice, "Eleanor, why did you have to go this far? Diane couldn't possibly be that bad." Diane took her own life in prison. After that, for decades, Nathan barely spoke a proper word to me. He was my only brother, and I could never bring myself to hate him for his blindness. I tried to appease him gently, helping him humbly. His career flourished, he completed University A and joined the Academy of Sciences, becoming a national hero. But I never imagined that even on his deathbed, he would still be clutching one of Diane's old coats. My heart turned to ashes. Our lifetime of siblinghood had finally come to an end. When I finally woke up completely, a week had passed. Sunlight streamed through the window. As I opened my eyes, I saw two furry heads, one large and one small, peering down at me. The larger one was Marvin, and the smaller one was the cat. Marvin and I locked eyes, both momentarily stunned into silence, until the cat noticed I was awake and quickly pounced on my face. It purred and excitedly licked my cheek. Marvin suddenly snapped back to reality, jumping off the bed with joy. She's awake! She's awake! Mr. and Mrs. Reed, who must have been exhausted from days of waiting, were dozing by my bedside. They jerked awake at his voice, faces lighting up with relief as they rushed to fetch water and porridge. As I tried to sit up, Mrs. Reed embraced me tenderly, her eyes welling with tears. She comforted me softly. There, dear child. Don't be afraid. While we Reeds aren't ones to cause trouble, we certainly won't let anyone bully our own. I know everything that happened, and I've already spoken with Commander Lowe. Now that you're awake, that girl will come and apologize to you properly. I looked at them all fussing over me, and my eyes stung with emotion. In my previous life, I'd devoted decades to my brother. Even on his deathbed, he had no kind words for me. He only remembered Diane Brooks, who had nearly ruined his career. Yet in this life, these people who'd known me for mere days showed such genuine care and affection. As various emotions washed over me, I leaned into Mrs. Reed's warm embrace, finally understanding everything. Nathan Gill had been reborn on my 5th birthday. In his second chance at life, he only wanted to make up for his deathbed regrets. That's why he abandoned me, giving all his love to Diane instead. I found it utterly ridiculous. I no longer regretted my decades of devotion in my previous life. I only hoped that in this life, while he chose to dedicate everything to Diane, I could live well for myself. Upon hearing of my recovery, Commander and Mrs. Lowe quickly came over. Many military families from the compound also visited. Diane was brought in, the scratches on her face still visible. They would likely leave scars. Nathan, who hadn't been adopted into the military family compound, insisted on coming along, presumably worried about Diane's treatment. Commander and Mrs. Lowe were known for their integrity, as was their housekeeper. When Diane began crying, Eleanor set her cat on me. The Lowe's housekeeper immediately scoffed. "Young lady, stop with the theatrics. I wasn't the only one who saw what happened that day. You stepped on the cat's paw first, then started provoking her." Diane simply couldn't bring herself to bow her head to me. Her eyes turned red with anger as she snapped at the housekeeper. "Just whose housekeeper are you anyway?" Her words instantly angered everyone present. Several military families spoke up. "It doesn't matter whose housekeeper she is. We all live in the same compound, which makes us family. No one gets to bully anyone else, children included. Everything must be fair." Commander Lowe, who had been my adoptive father for decades in my previous life, was a man of principle and pride, likely experiencing such embarrassment for the first time. His face reddened with anger as he berated Diane. "Enough. Apologize to her properly right now. If not, you'll spend another day kneeling in the compound to reflect on your actions." Diane acted as if she'd suffered a terrible injustice, covering her face and breaking into practiced sobs. Nathan, who could no longer contain himself, rushed forward angrily and pulled her behind him. "Diane would never bully anyone. This can't be her fault. We absolutely won't apologize." After he finished speaking, he turned back to comfort Diane. "Don't be afraid. I promised you, you'll never suffer any grievance again. If worst comes to worst, we won't stay here. We don't need the Lowes to adopt you." Commander and Mrs. Lowe looked at them in disbelief, angrily saying, "When you make a mistake, you should apologize. That's the rule of our entire military family compound. Otherwise, we Lowes certainly can't raise a girl like you." Diane clutched her hands in embarrassment, staring at me unwillingly with hesitation on her face. Nathan reached out directly and took her hand. "Don't be afraid of them. Diane, I promise you. This time, I definitely have a way to help you find a better family. Coming back to life again." He was clearly confident about protecting Diane. With this reassurance, Diane finally straightened her back. "I did nothing wrong. I won't apologize to Eleanor." Nathan gave me a cold glance. I felt a momentary sting in my heart, but it quickly passed. The boy held Diane's hand tightly as they left, their resolute figures never looking back. I stayed with the Reeds, and life was peaceful. Mrs. Reed quickly arranged the adoption papers, and I officially became a Reed. That evening, our family sat together to celebrate over dinner. In the midst of this harmony, I heard those comments again, filled with resentment. The protagonist couple has plot armor. Although this life is a bit rough, their ending will definitely be thousands of times better than the evil supporting character. The evil supporting character is just temporarily lucky. Just wait, the Reeds won't be prosperous for long. Look, Captain Reed is drinking again. His stomach problems must be getting worse. My mind jolted. Suddenly, I remembered what the comments had said before. Captain Reed would die of stomach cancer, and Mrs. Reed and Grandpa Reed would also pass away in depression. Captain Reed, with a flushed face, poured himself another drink and fruit juice for us, saying, "Let's have another toast, to celebrate Eleanor joining our family." The moonlight outside the window was bright, everything seemed fine. I quickly reached out and took away his glass of alcohol. Along with the bottle, I removed it all. I smiled. "Mr. Reed, as a military man, you should be strict with yourself, drink less." Marvin immediately helped me, saying foolishly, "Yes, you should drink less." Mrs. Reed's eyes reddened slightly as she stroked my head. I can't control him, but hopefully he'll listen to his daughter's words in the future. She continued, pretending to be serious as she looked at me. "But why are you still calling him Mr. Reed?" Blushing, I hesitantly changed my words. "Dad, Mum." As soon as I said this, 2 red envelopes were eagerly pressed into my hands. Mrs. Reed also mysteriously handed me a wooden box. "It's from the old man, his most treasured possession. He's ill, in hospital in the capital. He insisted on coming to see you, we had to try hard to stop him." My eyes turned red, almost crying again. Mrs. Reed hugged me tightly. The moonlight outside was like water, everything was good. I raised my head from her embrace and looked seriously at Captain Reed. "But you really need to drink less, and smoke less too." Captain Reed nodded repeatedly. All right, Dad will start quitting tomorrow. From now on, I'll be strict with myself, health comes first." Late at night, Marvin crept into my room again, clutching his blanket. With a mysterious air, he handed me a rag doll. The pink dress on the doll was something he had secretly spent many days making by himself. He'd been sneaking around lately, thinking I hadn't noticed. Somewhat embarrassed, he said, "Mom, Dad, and Grandpa all gave you welcome gifts for your new home. I couldn't be left out. It's just, the collar's a bit crooked," he added sheepishly. He lowered his head guiltily, stealing glances at me, seemingly afraid I might find it disappointing. I hugged the doll tightly and smiled through the sting in my eyes. "It's lovely. I really like it." I remembered how Captain Reed had developed stomach cancer from alcoholism in his previous life. At its core, it was a matter of the heart. I didn't know how Marvin's younger sister had passed away. The dead couldn't be brought back to life. But Marvin, who had become mentally ill because of it, could be helped. The other day, I overheard Captain Reed talking to Mrs. Reed outside the study. The psychiatric department in the provincial capital says psychological treatment isn't actually difficult. It's just. Marvin's scared. He doesn't want to go. If Marvin's psychological illness could be cured, having a healthy son might not completely ease Mr. and Mrs. Reed's pain over their daughter's passing, but perhaps they would at least stop neglecting their own health. I stroked the rag doll's braids. After a while, I grabbed Marvin's wrist. Moonlight filtered through the curtains as I looked at him earnestly and said, "I visited the provincial capital recently. There's a small stall outside the hospital that serves amazing ham and vegetable soup." Marvin immediately puffed up his chest and responded, "You want to go try it? That's easy. I'll ask Mum to come with us." His eyes sparkled with pride at being able to easily fulfill my wish. I looked at his delicate features, still young but already quite refined. Such a kind and handsome boy deserved a bright future. After a long silence, I spoke again. "Since we'll be there anyway, why don't we try seeing the doctor like Mum suggested?" Marvin immediately pressed his lips together, looking uneasy. I held his hand tightly and looked at him earnestly. I'll stay with you the whole time. If you feel uncomfortable, we'll leave. Just try once, please, brother. Marvin's downcast head suddenly shot up to look at me. His eyes held both hurt and sadness. The last time he was called brother must have been when his sister was still alive. At that moment, as he looked at me, he probably thought of that little girl. I didn't mind who he saw me as. Perhaps when he accepts psychological treatment and recovers his memories, he won't care for me like this anymore. Might even want me to leave the Reed family. But even if it was just for that one night when he turned back to bring me in from the countryside, I still hope he can be healthy and safe and have a good future. After a long while, he squeezed my hand and nodded, okay. As Mrs. Reed said. After Marvin left the provincial capital hospital, his psychological treatment showed significant progress. After his first session, he discovered there were no injections involved. The doctor wasn't scary, the treatment didn't cause headaches. And there was no dark room. He was no longer afraid and settled into his stay at the hospital. His only regret was that the small stall selling ham and vegetable soup outside the hospital had disappeared. I felt too embarrassed to tell him the truth. Actually, before I was 5, I had never been to the provincial capital. The story about the soup stall was completely made up. In the 3rd month of my stay with him at the hospital, he finally recovered his memories completely. That night, for the first time, he didn't let me into his room, choosing to sit alone all night. I didn't sleep either, thinking perhaps he would soon ask me to leave. Mr. and Mrs. Reed truly loved him. If he wanted me gone, even though they liked me, they might agree with his wishes. Although I thought I was mentally prepared. The thought of being abandoned again. Sitting in the corridor outside his room, I couldn't help but cry. Even with memories from my past life, I was still only 5 years old. If I left the Reed family, the orphanage and Nathan wouldn't take me back either. I didn't know where I could go. The more I thought about it, the more upset and scared I became. Then suddenly, the door opened. Marvin stood in the doorway, looking at me with shock. Why are you crying? My tears fell even harder. I choked out through my sobs. Are you going to send me away? I'm not a Reed, not your sister. Marvin froze for a moment, then frowned and quickly crouched down in front of me. He urgently wiped away my tears with his thumb and said, "You think because I wanted to be alone, that now I've recovered my memories I want to send you away? Eleanor, I just felt embarrassed about letting people see me cry. Whether before or now, I've never seen you as Jane." Jane Reed was his sister who passed away in the accident 6 months ago. I looked up at him with my swollen eyes. He sighed, "From the first moment I saw you, I only saw you as a poor child abandoned by her own brother. Not Jane, not a rag doll." My tightly clenched hands finally relaxed. The tension in my mind suddenly released. Like someone who'd survived a disaster, I sobbed until I could barely breathe. Marvin hugged me with an expression of helpless affection. "If you thought I would send you away once I recovered my memories, then why did you want me to get treatment?" Through my sobs, I mumbled, "I didn't want you to be silly forever." Marvin laughed near my ear, his voice full of joy and emotion. "You're the silly girl, Eleanor." My days at the Reed household passed smoothly, year after year. I started school, and Marvin returned to his studies as well. Outside of academics, I never forgot to monitor my adoptive father, Captain Reed, making sure he didn't smoke or drink too much. Following the military camp's requirements, I ensured he had his regular health checks. I also reminded Mrs. Reed and Grandpa Reed about their biannual medical examinations. When I turned 15, I began attending high school in the capital. Marvin was selected to join the military camp in the capital through recruitment. The online comments still often mentioned Captain Reed's stomach cancer, which had shown no warning signs. Captain Reed's annual checkups had never revealed even the slightest sign of stomach problems. Near the end of autumn, a new female student suddenly transferred to my class. I watched as she entered. Her bag dangled carelessly from one hand, and she had 7 or 8 piercings in her ears. Her face was heavily made up, and her neckline plunged daringly low. Such an appearance would have been eye-catching even 30 years later. Our classmates had always dressed modestly, and I was quite taken aback. After a second glance, I suddenly recognized her as Diane. The surrounding students whispered in shock. Even Mr. Doyle's face turned cold as he scolded. "Go home and change. Come back when you look like a proper student." Diane walked into the classroom, ignoring everyone with a contemptuous smirk. "I'm here on Factory Director Booth's recommendation. You can't refuse to accept me, can you?" Mr. Doyle's face turned purple with anger. "I don't care about any factory director. A student who doesn't look or act like one and shows no respect. I'm perfectly qualified to expel such a student." Just as he finished speaking, a young man about 18 or 19 rushed in, repeatedly apologizing. "My sister was late getting up today and had to rush here. Mr. Doyle, I promise she won't look like this tomorrow." This time, I recognized him immediately. The boy speaking so submissively was Nathan. His features were still as handsome as when he was 18 in his previous life. But now he looked exhausted and worn out. Though barely of age, he already showed signs of premature aging. Diane, whom he couldn't let go of even in his death in his previous life. In this life, she hadn't turned out to be the well-behaved, sensible girl he had hoped for. My desk mate whispered gossip to me. "She has the nerve to mention Factory Director Booth. Her brother struggled to get her into school in the capital, living frugally. He agreed to take 6 months off school to tutor that awful son of Factory Director Booth. They say he even sold a precious bracelet to give as a gift just to secure her place here." I asked in disbelief, 6 months off school? My companion replied, "Yes. Her brother barely managed to get into a regular university. He's only just started, and now he has to take 6 months off. He might even get expelled. How is that any different from ruining his future?" I was shocked to hear this. In his previous life, at 18, Nathan had already been admitted to University A, a brilliant student specially cultivated by the Academy of Sciences. In this life, when I left him at 8, his academic talent was still evident. Now, he had fallen to such circumstances. My companion continued whispering, "They're both orphans. The sister has been adopted by more than 10 families, causing chaos in each one. Her brother has given up scholarships in good schools multiple times, frequently skipping classes and dropping out for her sake. They say he used to be brilliant. But even a genius can't withstand such disruption." I gradually lost track of the voices around me. When I looked up again, I suddenly met Nathan's tired, hollow eyes. The pleading expression hadn't yet left his face. When he looked at me, he froze for a moment, probably not recognizing me at first. After a while, he suddenly came to his senses. He stared at me intently, his eyes filled with urgency, joy, disbelief, and pain. His pale face trembled, and even his eyes turned red. He seemed to forget about everyone around him as he hurried towards me. His voice shaking, "Eleanor. In my previous life, I gave him nearly everything for decades. Yet he never shed a tear for me, not even once. Even on my deathbed, he wouldn't call me that way. Now, how ironic it all seems." I pull my lips into a slight smile, finding it rather amusing. I pretend not to hear, turning my gaze to the window. Yet somehow, my eyes still mist over for reasons unknown. The person beside me asks in surprise, "Was he calling you?" I reply softly, "How could that be possible?" "You must have misheard." Nathan stands there, his expression awkward and helpless, knowing full well I no longer wish to acknowledge him. His steps towards me finally halt. With reddened eyes, he turns away and leaves the classroom in disarray. My desk mate looks at me, her voice filled with surprise. "Eleanor, are you about to cry?" I rub my eyes and say, "It's nothing, probably just some chalk dust in my eyes." Something occurs to me, and I ask my desk mate, "Where did he sell his bracelet?" She responds, "I heard Factory Director Booth mention it when I was out dining. I think it was at the pawn shop on North Street." After speaking, she blushes and mysteriously slips something into my hand. The floating comments in the air remain unchanged after all these years. Still filled with discontent. "Don't get cocky, you evil supporting character. The main couple's troubles are only temporary. The female lead is just going through puberty, being a bit rebellious. She'll mature soon enough and start taking good care of the male lead, sympathizing with him. Their ending will definitely be a sweet and perfect happily ever after. I've long since stopped paying attention to these words. I only know that Nathan's life in this lifetime is most likely truly ruined. After school, Marvin comes to pick me up in his grandfather's old Land Rover. He just got his driver's license and happens to have leave from the military camp this afternoon. The usually serious and cool-headed young man at the camp still acts like a tease in front of me. He rolls down the window, rests one arm on it, and shows off proudly. "How's that? Do I look like Grandpa or what?" I roll my eyes and get into the passenger seat. Then I remember something. I take out a pink envelope from my school bag and hand it to him. Marvin freezes, remains silent for a while, his expression becoming extremely uncomfortable. Whether it's because of the sunlight through the window or not, I notice even his ears seem to have turned red. He coughs lightly and snatches the envelope. Looking awkwardly out the other window, he asks, "What's this?" I take out my water bottle for a drink, casually replying, "A love letter. It's not the first time I've passed one to you. Since I started high school, he's picked me up many times." The grown-up boy is no longer that little fool who used to collect rubbish. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, shaped by military life, his physique and features are now impeccable. The first time he came to my school in his military uniform, he made many teenage girls blush. Since then, I've been asked to pass on love letters to him every week. He used to just toss them away without a second thought. But today, he inexplicably becomes angry and asks in a cold voice, "In what capacity are you passing on these silly love letters? These kids and their puppy love, are they even of age?" I explain helplessly, "You're my brother, so naturally as your sister. My desk mate started school late, she's actually of age. If you don't like these things, next time I'll..." Marvin throws the love letter out the window, his face cold. His emotions and voice uncontrollably escalate. "Who's your brother? Do we share the same blood? Were you born from my mother? Were you with the Reeds since birth?" I don't know what had gotten into him today. My temples were throbbing with anger as I reached for the car door handle. He grabbed my arm, his voice still filled with irritation. "You can't even remember a 50-meter route, and you dare to get out alone? Who's going to find you if you get lost?" I've always had a terrible sense of direction, never able to remember my way around. All these years, whether going to school or anywhere else, either Marvin accompanied me or our housekeeper drove me. I angrily pushed him away. "It's none of your business." The security guard sitting in the back seat remained silent. Marvin had just gotten his driver's license, and Grandpa Reed, being concerned, had assigned someone to follow the car. With a grim face, Marvin tossed the car keys to the security guard in the back seat. He got out and slammed the door shut before striding away. Being angry myself, I had no intention of stopping him. The security guard drove towards home. Suddenly, I remembered the bracelet Nathan had pawned. I had its twin on my wrist. Mom had bought them from the temple when she was pregnant with me, using her savings. She said she got one for Nathan and one for me. They were meant to keep us siblings safe and harmonious throughout our lives. She passed away shortly after giving birth to me. Those words were told to me by Nathan. In my previous life, Nathan and I had maintained a somewhat harmonious relationship for many years. But in this life, that was no longer possible. Nevertheless, it was Mom's keepsake. Not wanting it to be lost to strangers, I spoke to the security guard. "Could we go to the pawn shop on North Street?" The car turned around, passing by the angrily walking Marvin, and headed in the opposite direction. I went to the pawn shop. Fortunately, the bracelet was still there, and the owner was agreeable, selling it to me at a fair price. Suddenly, someone pushed open the door. The pawnbroker, who had been smiling at me moments before, immediately turned cold and said, "You again. Just because you pawned something doesn't mean we'll keep it for you forever. This young lady has already bought it, so don't come back again." I turned around to see Nathan standing in the doorway, looking distressed. The capital had turned cold with the deep autumn. He wore an overcoat that must have been years old, its cuffs faded from washing. Looking at him, I remembered the proud and distinguished man from my previous life, who went from University A to the Academy of Sciences. His career had been prestigious, accumulating achievements that countless people admired and envied. Now, thinking back to my previous life feels like a mere illusion from a dream. His eyes met mine. They seemed covered in thick dust, his gaze dark and desolate. In this life, that uncut jade from the orphanage had lost his chance to be discovered. By his own doing. The pawnbroker wrapped up the bracelet for me, and I took it, walking past Nathan to leave. As I stepped out, he grabbed my arm with trembling hands. The security guard waiting outside immediately got out of the car, his face stern as he started towards us. I signaled with my eyes that everything was fine. He stayed by the car, watching Nathan warily, the once privileged prodigy of my previous life. In this life, he had become someone everyone seemed to despise. I felt conflicted emotions as I turned around and looked at him coldly. "Do you need something?" His face trembled, looking both lost and desperate. Seeming unsure what to say, after a long while, he finally asked tentatively, "Eleanor, have you been well all these years?" My clenched fist at my side loosened and tightened again. I let out a cold laugh. "As you can see, I'm doing far better than both you and Diane. I'll never forget." After he came back to relive his life, how eagerly and firmly he promised Diane, "From now on, everything you have will be 1,000 times better than Eleanor's." My brother, whom I had cared for wholeheartedly for decades in my previous life. The first thing he did in this new life was to treat me as an enemy. He abandoned me, who couldn't remember the way, with a homeless boy in the countryside. He knew perfectly well that I couldn't find my way around the countryside. That silly boy couldn't help me and might even harm me. I would be hungry, cold. I might even face accidents, death. He knew all this, he just stopped caring in this new life. My survival wasn't due to his kindness. It was my pure luck and the goodness of Marvin and his family. Nathan's eyes had turned red. After a long silence, his voice trembled as if it took all his strength to speak. "Eleanor, I regret it. I've thought about it countless times over these years. After all, we are siblings." I laughed coldly. "You don't regret it. You've just weighed the pros and cons over the years, and suddenly realized Diane isn't as wonderful as you thought in your previous life. Now you've suddenly remembered my worth. Remembered the sister who in the previous life had persuaded him to accept support from that prestigious academic family in the provincial capital, who had encouraged him to join the Academy of Sciences, helped him climb the ladder of success. Everything I'd helped him achieve in the previous life, which he'd gotten but despised. Everything he thought would come easily to him in this life too. He thought he was gold that would shine anywhere. He thought he could effortlessly help Diane get the best of everything. But in the end, it was all just a fool's dream. And that pure, innocent love he kept thinking about until his death in the previous life. In this life, she gradually showed her true colors. Became like leftover crumbs trampled under the table. Nathan's face had turned as white as paper, twisted in pain. After a long while, he still protested shakily. But still, even if Diane had such thoughts in the previous life, it was just a moment of confusion. "Eleanor, she didn't deserve to die. You filed that lawsuit and literally took her life." I looked at him. I couldn't tell anymore whether he was more hateful or pitiful. Even now, after being dragged down by Diane for so many years, he still thought her death in prison was unjust, that it was my fault. I felt nothing inside anymore and just sneered. "Then keep on making it up to her." I reached out to push him away. His face trembled with urgency. That's not what I meant. I've compensated her enough over these years. Eleanor, I've made up my mind, I won't interfere with her matters anymore. Can you come back to me?" I didn't want to say another word to him. I just replied coldly, "Impossible." I forcefully pushed his hand away and walked straight ahead. Behind me, Nathan's voice was hoarse with emotion. "We've always been siblings, from the very beginning. Marvin is just an outsider, and the Reeds are nothing but strangers. Eleanor, have you really forgotten? Forgotten your brother?" In his increasingly incoherent voice, I thought I heard a slight catch. Nathan Gill, who had never cried in front of me in either this life or the last. Perhaps I had just misheard. As I walked towards the parked car, his voice continued, filled with desperation. I'll get into University A again, I'll return to the Academy of Sciences. Eleanor, I'll prove to you that everything can be just like before. The second chance he had yearned for decades in his previous life had finally come true. Yet now he longed for everything to be the same as before. I suppose that's human nature, we always think what we can't have is the best. The wind made my eyes blur. Suddenly, a familiar warm hand firmly grasped mine. For the first time, our fingers intertwined. I turned in surprise to see Marvin, who had appeared without my notice. He held my hand tightly, and as if that wasn't enough, he pulled me close. His challenging and hostile gaze fixed directly on the devastated Nathan. Eleanor has been part of the Reed family for a long time now. Nathan, you're the outsider here. He must have heard quite a bit of our earlier conversation. Nathan stumbled, desperately trying to follow us. She's only my sister, Marvin, you can never change that. Marvin swiftly opened the car's back door, ushered me inside, and smoothly closed it. He leaned against the car door, fixing Nathan with an icy stare. Go ahead and try. See if she'll go back with you now. Under Nathan's furious glare, Marvin got into the car beside me and ordered the security guard to drive away. His final glance at Nathan through the car window was filled with contempt and disdain. As the car pulled away, the desperate figure chasing after us in the rearview mirror quickly vanished from sight. The stern-faced man beside me suddenly changed his demeanor. Dropping gracefully to one knee before me, he skillfully wrapped his arms around my knees and began sobbing with remorse. Eleanor, I was wrong. I kicked him lightly, my anger still burning. Get up! Stop putting on an act. Marvin refused to move, pleading through his choked sobs. You can't go back with him. What would Mom and Dad do if you left us? For a moment, I was reminded of that 8-year-old silly boy who used to collect rubbish in the countryside. The cold, quiet model recruit everyone talked about in the military camp seemed worlds apart from the person before me. After his dramatic outburst, Marvin continued his earnest confession. Eleanor, those were just angry words, I didn't mean any of it. The reason I didn't want to see you passing love letters to others for me was because He hesitated for a long while, then sighed. Never mind, I'll tell you in a few years. I became increasingly annoyed. If you don't want to receive love letters, just say so. Who cares about helping you anyway? Marvin lowered his head and apologized, I'm sorry. I turned away, not bothering to respond. That evening, my adoptive parents learned about it from the security guard. Mr. Reed was so angry that he made Marvin kneel in the courtyard. Mrs. Reed furiously scolded him. Eleanor is your real sister, my own daughter. I'm telling you. Marvin, kneeling there guiltily, suddenly raised his head with determination. No, she's not. My adoptive parents were completely beside themselves. They both gave him a beating and made him kneel through the night. He still maintained, she's not. I watched him through the window, wondering what had gotten into him. I supposed it was because his real sister was Jane, who had passed away long ago. As an adopted daughter of the Reed family, I could never replace Jane's position as their true daughter. It was understandable, not his fault. Even though I'd been calling him brother since I was 5. All these years, I'd truly considered him my blood brother. I pleaded with my adoptive parents, and they finally relented, allowing Marvin to come inside at midnight. But Marvin, stubborn about something, insisted on kneeling until sunrise. He hadn't closed his eyes all night, yet still insisted on driving me to school himself. I felt uneasy, and he seemed quite awkward too. For once, we had nothing to say to each other during the journey. At school, just as I entered the gates, Diane angrily blocked my path. She grabbed my backpack and demanded, "Did you tell Nathan to cut ties with me and ignore me?" I looked at her face covered in dark makeup, and the lingering smell of cigarettes on her. I had absolutely no desire to communicate with her. I coldly pushed her aside and walked straight to the classroom. She was so thin now, like a skeleton, and almost stumbled from my push. I heard her furious voice behind me. "Don't be so smug. Nathan and I are doing great. We'll be 1,000 times better off than you." I'd heard such comments countless times in online comments. They were tiresome. According to the commenters, when Diane and Nathan weren't doing well before, it was because they were young and immature. Now, it's because Diane is going through teenage rebellion. And Nathan is still developing. Who knows what the commenters will say in a few years. I entered the classroom and had just put down my bag. Diane ran in crying, tears streaming down her face as she came straight to me. She sobbed dramatically. "Eleanor, please give me back my necklace. I saw everything. I know you were just joking with me." I looked at her triumphant eyes, then down at my backpack. Remembering how she'd grabbed my bag at the school entrance, I suddenly understood. Having lived 2 lifetimes, her tactics were still so crude. Before I could speak, Marvin suddenly entered. He took my bag, expertly opened it and pulled out the necklace inside, placing it in front of Diane. "You mean this?" He must have seen Diane stopping me at the school gate, so he followed us. The surrounding students began to murmur. This was the best high school in the provincial capital, with strict discipline. Stealing could lead to expulsion. Diane looked smug, then raised her eyes to Marvin in his neat military uniform. Her gaze suddenly filled with admiration. She blushed, sobbing, "Thank you, brother." Marvin laughed. "Why thank me for something you planted? And since when am I your brother?" Diane's face froze, turning bright red. I don't understand. You're falsely accusing me." I sneered, holding up the rusty necklace. "Diane, this cheap fake. Even my housekeeper's grandson wouldn't use this for playing dress-up. You think I'd steal it from you? My brother is a serviceman, and you're accusing him of lying. Do you know the consequences of falsely accusing military personnel?" Marvin added fuel to the fire. "Shall I call in the other students who saw you plant the necklace?" I could tell he was bluffing. If there were really such witnesses, he would have brought them in already. But Diane panicked, her face turning pale. She had no one backing her now, and couldn't afford the consequences of falsely accusing a serviceman. Even if Nathan still supported her, which he didn't. Nathan had no family background now. What could he do to protect her against the law? Diane apologized through tears. "I'm sorry, it was just a joke." In her previous life, she'd said the same thing. After selling Nathan's University A acceptance letter, she called it a joke, and Nathan believed her. But now, no one would believe her anymore. The surrounding students expressed their disgust. Why is someone like her even in school? Just get out. It's bad luck having her in the same classroom. With Eleanor's family background, who does she think she's fooling with that rusty fake necklace? The disgusted voices turned to mocking laughter. Diane, who had always been vain in both lives, had probably never faced such humiliation. She clenched her teeth in fists, suppressing her resentment. Marvin turned to the teacher who had entered. "I will apply to the school for Diane's expulsion. Before she's officially expelled, please move her seat as far from Eleanor as possible, so she can't plant any more rubbish in people's bags." Laughter erupted. This time, even the usually strict teacher didn't try to stop it. Diane was moved to the last row, to a corner seat next to the rubbish bin. As Marvin left the classroom, she stared at his back with a humiliated expression. Her eyes were filled with obsessive admiration, making it sickening to watch. I was glad Marvin didn't look back, or he might have been sick. Nathan did come to school again. The school had contacted him, saying Diane had falsely accused a classmate shortly after enrolling, showing deplorable behavior. If Nathan didn't come to address the situation, the school would skip all procedures and expel Diane immediately. Nathan, who had sacrificed almost everything to secure Diane's place at the school, couldn't bear to see it lost. The same person who had sworn yesterday to never help Diane again. He still rushed over today, looking anxious and flustered. When I went to deliver homework to the teacher, through the office door, I heard the headmaster sighing repeatedly as he spoke to Nathan. Look at what you've become. What have you done to yourself for such a wayward student? When I taught you in primary school, everyone said you were a genius. They said you were destined for University A, the future of the nation. And now, the headmaster's words trailed off with a regretful sigh. He had worked his way up from the grassroots level. In both his previous life and this one, he had been Nathan's primary school teacher. In his previous life, Nathan had been his pride and joy even in his retirement years. But now, as Nathan left the office with a dazed expression, Diane rushed after him in tears, unwilling to accept the situation. Brother, Eleanor is just bullying me because of her privileged background. She stole my necklace. Nathan's hand tensed, veins visible on his skin, his face trembling. He must have been holding back for many years. But at this moment, his emotions finally broke loose. Before Diane could finish speaking, Nathan's shaking hand rose. Another slap landed harshly across her face. His eyes surged with emotions, but his voice was hoarse and weak. Enough. His gaze held only disappointment. Diane, she wouldn't stoop to taking your things. Diane's face swelled red on one side as she stared at him in disbelief. After a moment, her expression twisted into something grotesque. Her eyes filled with hatred. You look down on me too? What right do you have to look down on me? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in such a miserable state today. Nathan couldn't believe his ears. What did you say? Diane glared at him viciously. Back then, Regimental Commander Lowe had already adopted me. If you hadn't said you'd find me a better family and taken me away, I would still be Commander Lowe's precious daughter now. And my adoptive father would have been even higher ranked than Eleanor's. Nathan's face gradually turned pale. Diane, after all these years, you're saying I ruined your life? His 10 years of dedication had only earned him Diane's hatred. It must have felt like a sharp blade piercing his heart. He stumbled, barely managing to support himself against the nearby wall. Over these years, I'd heard quite a bit. After the Lowe family returned Diane to the orphanage, Nathan, who had always been too proud to ask for favors, humbled himself to ask his favorite teacher at school. He begged the orphanage director, begged everyone he could reach. He found Diane a deputy headmaster as an adoptive father. Later, he struggled to connect her with a military commander's family. Then there was a humble but kind-hearted couple who treated Diane exceptionally well. But with over 10 families, none lasted more than 6 months before Diane turned their households upside down. Afterward, no one would adopt Diane. Nathan gave up his own chance at a scholarship. He stayed with her, year after year, wasting away his youth. But in the end, what he received was Diane's bitter accusation. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in such a miserable state today. Nathan laughed bitterly. As he laughed, his eyes turned bloodshot. His eyes were vacant as he looked at Diane, unable to utter another word. Diane spat in disgust and turned away. I entered the office to hand in my homework. When I came out, Nathan was still standing there motionless, like a frozen puppet. As I passed by him, I heard his desperate, regretful voice. Eleanor, have I really made an irreversible mistake? I turned around and looked at him calmly. People are responsible for their own choices and consequences. Nathan looked at me with pain in his eyes. But we're siblings, sharing the same blood. I stared at him, looking at his face that now seemed aged beyond his years. After a long while, I finally spoke. Not anymore. Nathan, since you abandoned 5-year-old Eleanor in the countryside after your rebirth, that Eleanor Gill died there. Now I am a Reed, Marvin's sister. I have nothing to do with Nathan anymore. I left without looking back. Behind me, there was a dull thud of something falling. Nathan must have collapsed. I heard his faint, suppressed sobs. This time, I was sure it wasn't my imagination. But my heart no longer stirred for him. Throughout the day's classes, Diane sat in the back row, glaring at me viciously. I knew well enough she wouldn't let this go. The worse her life became, the less she could tolerate seeing me doing well. At the end of the month, it was Grandpa Reed's birthday, and the Reeds hosted a party. Besides people from the military family compound, All other relatives and friends of the Reeds came. Marvin, who usually showed little interest in such gatherings, pulled me to the window to teach me military chess. Until amid the commotion, factory director Booth arrived with gifts. Marvin had disliked him ever since learning that Diane got into the school through his recommendation. Yet factory director Booth was skilled at flattery. As soon as he arrived, he lavishly praised Grandpa Reed and my adoptive parents. Then he came over to Marvin and me, clicking his tongue in admiration. The Reed children are growing up so splendidly, a perfect match. I nearly choked on my tea. People nearby, knowing his lack of education, quietly reminded him with gentle laughter. Booth, that's not how a perfect match should be used. Marvin, however, seemed to be in an unusually good mood. He actually got up and didn't refuse when factory director Booth invited him for drinks. Factory director Booth, having finally gotten close to him, mentioned getting his good-for-nothing son into the military camp with just a word from Marvin. It wasn't until after lunch that he finally let Marvin go. Whatever they had discussed, it had left Marvin, who rarely drank, half drunk. On Grandpa's birthday, my adoptive parents unusually didn't scold Marvin, letting him rest in his upstairs bedroom. I had the housekeeper make some hangover soup. When I opened his bedroom door with the soup, what I saw inside struck me like lightning. Next to the half-conscious Marvin on the bed lay a disheveled woman. He pulled her into his embrace, then pushed her away, mumbling unclear words. "Eleanor, don't, in a few years." He was truly out of it. My hands went slack, the porcelain bowl shattered, soup spilling everywhere. The woman on the bed heard the noise, pushed away from Marvin and ran off the bed. Covering her messy clothes, she began to sob loudly. Guests on the second floor, hearing the commotion, came over. I finally saw clearly that tear-stained face. It was Diane. Though crying, she was clearly confident in her victory, unable to hide the triumph in her eyes. "Mr. Reed, you've taken advantage of me. If you won't take responsibility, I might as well die." She was only 16. Marvin was facing such serious accusations, and there were no witnesses when it happened. If he didn't marry Diane to keep her quiet, he would not only lose his military status but might also face severe criminal charges. Some uninformed guests whispered among themselves, "Such a promising young man, how could he do something so foolish?" And at his grandpa's birthday party no less. Young people these days, they can be quite reckless, especially after drinking. Indeed. The murmurs grew louder. Marvin got up from the bed, still dazed and confused. Diane shot me a challenging look. She made to throw herself against the wall but was quickly restrained by the others. She had told me before that everything I had would eventually be hers. So this was what she meant. I let the whispers grow louder. Even the guests from downstairs had gathered up here, and my adoptive parents' faces had turned ashen. When the commotion had reached its peak, I finally turned toward the carved screen in the bedroom and called out, "Grandpa." From behind came an authoritative yet awkward cough. The security guard moved the screen aside. There sat more than 10 retired military officers playing chess. Diane's sobs caught in her throat. She stared in shock at the dozen stern faces that had suddenly appeared in the bedroom. The color drained from her face. Grandpa Reed was a senior military commander who had only retired earlier this year. Being elderly, he couldn't handle all the fuss and flattery. So I had suggested he invite his old friends to play chess in the sectioned-off part of Marvin's bedroom. Little did we know they would witness quite a show through the carved screen. The old commander spoke with resignation. "We were just having a nice game of chess. Then this young lady suddenly rushed in, jumped onto young Marvin's bed, taking off her clothes." The others coughed lightly, unable to continue listening. Grandpa Reed looked innocent. As Commander Lowe said, "Since the actress was already performing, we thought we'd watch for a bit." Marvin was finally coming to his senses. He looked at Diane, now trembling with shame on the floor, then at his grandfather, and finally at me. He understood everything now. His gaze, filled with anger and betrayal, fixed on my face. I instinctively coughed and looked away. I had indeed had other motives for suggesting Grandpa stay here. I had sensed that Diane had her eyes on Marvin and despised me. I suspected she might try something during such an occasion, though I hadn't thought someone of her status would manage to get in. Now that things had unfolded as I'd anticipated, it seemed like I'd used Marvin as bait. The old commander waved his hand and ordered the guard. "All right, Smith, take her away and deal with this. Everyone else, carry on with the party, it's nothing serious." As Diane was led away by the guard, the crowd dispersed back downstairs. The old commander and his friends slipped away faster than rabbits. I tried to make my escape too, but Marvin, his face dark with anger, quickly caught my arm. As if terribly wronged, he gripped my shoulders and accused me repeatedly. "If she's the actress, what am I, just a prop? Eleanor, look me in the eyes. Doesn't my reputation matter to you at all? You're heartless, absolutely heartless." I didn't dare to look up, feeling extremely guilty as I tried to appease him. All right, I won't do this again." Marvin towered over me with his tall frame. Like a deeply hurt child, he buried his face in the crook of my neck and sobbed. "You're saying again? You want it to happen again?" Overcome with guilt, I raised my hand to stroke his head. There. It was my fault this time. I was careless. But as I lifted my hand, he suddenly gripped my wrist. He pinned my arm against the wall. His face abruptly withdrew from my neck, and he looked down at me with intense eyes from such close proximity. The hurt and resentful emotions from earlier had completely vanished from his face. I could feel his hand that held my arm trembling. Yet he wouldn't let go. It was dusk, the twilight hour. The setting sun filtered through the window like scattered gold leaf. At this close distance, I saw his Adam's apple bob, or perhaps I imagined it. I stared at him, realizing for the first time. That boy who had walked me to and from school countless times in my memories. Now, his features had grown sharp and mature, transformed into a man. He was so close, so very close. His fingertips brushed a strand of hair near my ear, as if having made some decision, twirling it between his fingers. I heard him call out, "Eleanor." He had called me this countless times over the years. But this time, it suddenly made me feel inexplicably flustered. In his gaze, in those carefully guarded yet intensely overflowing emotions in his eyes, I suddenly read something absurd. Something that made me instinctively want to retreat in fear. In this life, I was abandoned by my brother at age 5. Marvin took me home and has cared for me like a brother for 10 years. Though we share no blood relation, I had long considered him my closest family. I suddenly felt at a loss. After a long moment, I finally gathered my wits and said shakily, "Brother, I need to go downstairs." Marvin continued to look down at me, staring intently. He remained silent for a long while. Finally, he released my hand. I fled almost in panic, hurrying downstairs. The ground floor was crowded with guests, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Walking outside, I saw the police cars had arrived. Diane, her face full of panic, was being held by the Reed family's security and handed over to the police. Nathan had come too, presumably notified by the police as Diane's current brother. Diane had lost all her previous arrogance, crying and begging, "Brother, please help me, please plead for me, I really know I was wrong." But Nathan just looked at her woodenly, his voice detached. "I'm not your brother. Diane, I told you. The last time I went to school to plead for you was the last time I'd help you." As Diane was led to the police car, she cried out in despair, "It's all your fault. You're the one who made me end up like this." Nathan turned his head away, refusing to look at her. I saw a tear slide down his profile. This was the first time in this life I'd seen him cry. Perhaps he pitied Diane. Or perhaps more likely, he was grieving for his so-called second chance at life. Being underage, Diane avoided a criminal sentence. However, she was still detained for 2 weeks for disciplinary education. On her first day of detention, she confessed to everything. She had seduced factory director Booth's son and manipulated her way into the Reed family. Director Booth, who had little education himself, had always hoped his son would become an excellent scholar. That's why he pulled strings to help Diane get into a prestigious high school in the capital. His intention was to convince Nathan, a brilliant but poor student, to drop out temporarily and tutor his son for 6 months, hoping his son would get into a good university. Now this huge scandal had erupted. Director Booth was terrified. He rushed to the Reed family overnight with his son to apologize, and immediately dismissed Nathan from his tutoring position. After offending the Reed family, everyone in the capital avoided Nathan and Diane like the plague. Diane was expelled from school. Nathan completely cut ties with Diane and left the capital for their small town. He became extremely withdrawn, spending another year studying alone in high school. When he took the A-levels again, he missed University A by just 20 points. He had always been naturally gifted in academics, though no one knew how hard he must have worked that year. Such improvement was already remarkable. But without a word, he repeated another year. As for Diane, after her release from detention, she disappeared. In early winter, Marvin went south to train new recruits at the military camp. I was on holiday and accompanied him to the small town. The military vehicle passed by the town's high school. I happened to see Nathan studying alone under the big tree outside the school gate. In my previous life, he had been sponsored by a wealthy family. He had always been proud and outgoing at school, never short of friends. But in this life, every time I saw him, he seemed to be completely alone. Before, Diane was occasionally by his side, but now he was truly solitary. Through the open window of the car, I glanced at him. He seemed to sense it and suddenly looked up, meeting my gaze. As the car drove past, it was just that fleeting moment. There was a flash of urgency in his eyes. But this time, he remained silent, saying nothing. In my final glimpse, I saw him clutching his book tightly, the corners of his eyes reddened. The following year's A-levels, Nathan missed University A by just 2 points. That same year, I also took my A-levels and achieved good results. I gave up offers from more prestigious programs and universities. Instead, I chose the first university in the country to offer a fashion design program. I became one of the first fashion design students in the country. The economic reforms were beginning, and a wave of business entrepreneurship would soon arrive. The fashion design industry would have an extremely broad market and future. I wanted to catch this wave of opportunity. One day, I hoped to contribute to the country's development with my success. My classmates felt sorry for me, saying I had better options. But the entire Reed family fully supported me, helping me enroll smoothly. The next time I happened to hear news about Nathan, I learned that with his score just 2 points short of University A, he had accepted an offer from another prestigious university only slightly less renowned. And in this life, eerily similar to my previous one, Diane, who had vanished for years, suddenly reappeared. She had somehow obtained Nathan's acceptance letter and sold it to a wealthy family's son. When Nathan discovered this, she still tried to play innocent. I was just joking, I'll go get it back right now. In this life, Nathan did as I had done in my previous life. He filed a lawsuit against Diane. Along with it, he submitted to the court evidence of her years of theft, fraud, and extortion schemes where she seduced married men and blackmailed them. Diane was sentenced to 10 years in prison. On the day the court hearing ended, I went to the hospital with my adoptive mother for her checkup, where I ran into Nathan. He looked even paler than the last time I had seen him. I suddenly realized that his complexion had become unnaturally white. He had received his acceptance letter and was planning to enroll in university. But for some reason, he suddenly gave up. Looking at the diagnosis paper in his hand, I had a sudden intuition that he might be seriously ill. He walked up to me, his eyes hollow and empty. After a long pause, he gave a bitter laugh. "Eleanor, perhaps this is my karma." I frowned and asked, "Are you ill?" A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes as he asked eagerly, almost pleadingly, "Do you want me to be ill?" I turned away and said coldly, "It's none of my business." Nathan's face trembled, and after a long while, he said hoarsely, "Eleanor, in both our past and present lives, I've wronged you terribly." The following spring, when new buds were sprouting on the trees, I learned of Nathan's death. He had passed away from end-stage heart failure. In our past life, his heart had always been healthy. In this life, perhaps due to years of emotional strain and accumulated depression, he had developed such an illness. In his past life, he had been a national hero given a state funeral. In this life, he had no family or friends, not even someone to handle his funeral arrangements. His primary school teacher, now a headmaster at a school in the capital, bought him a burial plot and arranged his funeral. Beyond that, no one paid attention to his passing. On the day of his burial, I suddenly developed a high fever that night and had a dream. I saw those comments again. They were snarling and raging, venting their dissatisfaction with the plot. Wasn't this supposed to be a sweet, happy ending for the couple? Why did it end like this? Among those chaotic, accusatory comments, I saw the author's final message. Neither my characters nor my readers were satisfied with the ending of the previous life story. So I let the characters live another life, where I no longer controlled anyone's actions through the plot. Everyone is responsible for their own choices and consequences. Wind blew in through the window, sweeping away all the words in the air. The book that had been written across 2 lifetimes finally scattered in the wind. When I woke up, my adoptive parents and grandfather, along with Marvin, were by my bedside. Their expressions showed the same concern they had shown for the past 10 years. It seemed as if I had been here since birth. Late at night, Marvin made a bed on the floor beside mine, just as he used to do when we were younger. As moonlight poured in like water, he suddenly said to me, "Eleanor, your birthday is coming up soon. I have something very important to tell you." I was getting drowsy and mumbled sleepily, "All right." On my birthday, Marvin, who had always been the most dedicated in training, extraordinarily requested a full day's leave from the military camp. Since early morning, he had been secretly preparing something, and even made a trip to the jeweler's. I paid no attention to him and went to school as usual. It wasn't until evening that I returned home to celebrate my birthday. The candles were lit on the cake, with my adoptive parents and Grandpa Reed by my side. Marvin hurriedly came in from outside, holding what appeared to be a small box, which he quickly hid behind his back. I made a wish as the candles flickered. I hope to stay healthy and happy forever with Mom, Dad, Grandpa, and brother. The candles were blown out. I noticed Marvin beside me, his face seemingly frozen for a moment. He never brought out that box. Late at night, he slept on a mattress beside my bed. I suddenly remembered what he had told me before. "On your birthday, I have something very important to tell you." I leaned over the edge of my bed, looking at his face. "What was that important thing you wanted to say?" Marvin turned to face the moonlight coming through the window. After a long while, without turning back to look at me, he said softly, "Nothing. What I wanted to say was the same as your wish." I lay back in my warm duvet. In the early hours, it began to snow outside. The window wasn't properly closed, and snowflakes scattered inside. Marvin got up to close it. Looking out into the dark night, I somehow remembered, many years ago, on a quiet snowy night at the orphanage, when I had a high fever, Nathan stayed by my bedside all night. He held my hand and said softly, "Eleanor, don't be afraid, I will always be here."